My name is Andy Sales, and this is my policy autobiography and ruminations for the future assignment. When I really got thinking about what this assignment was to contain, especially with talking about some of the policies that have been enacted in New York State, as of late that are up for discussion, no one topic stuck out to me more than the topic of Regents exams. I feel like I have an interesting and unique ability to talk about this topic, so I felt like this would be the best course of action to go forward. I feel as though I am in a unique position to discuss this particular topic because I have so many friends from so many other places other than New York State. I thought it important to get the input of some people from New York State as well, but I wanted to kind of talk about Regents exams to some of my friends from out of state, see what they think, see what their high school experience was like, and see where they are now compared to where some New York people are right now. What am I speaking of when I'm saying the Regents exam? Those would be the state administered tests at the end of June, towards the end of the school year for New York State schools. I just want to clarify this in case there was someone not from New York watching this video. These are exams made by the state to be administered at the end of certain classes in the New York State high school system. There's a couple of different reasons why Regents exams are so important to New York State, the main one being the Regents diplomas. So there are a couple different kinds of diplomas. There's local diplomas, there's Regents diplomas, and advanced Regents diplomas. Those advanced Regents diplomas are kind of preserved for the students that show exemplary in a handful of different ways. You have to get, I believe, 9 Regents exams to get an advanced Regents diploma. With a normal Regents diploma only having about 5 Regents required for the topic. Now, before I go into my interviews or anything, I do want to specify this is not official research. I did not take this all out and plot it into a big paper or a study or anything. This is just from the little amount of collection that I did and interviews that I did with some people here in New York and then other people outside of New York State. So to examine the Regents in kind of a post-mortem way, now that they're kind of phasing out in 2027, still confusing on how much it's going to phase out, what that's going to entail. But I do think that it is important to discuss individuals' experience with Regents exams. For instance, for me, I did fine on most of my Regents exams. I got the advanced Regents diploma. I believe the only one I did poorly on was chemistry. But I don't feel like that Regents exam was a great showcase of my knowledge in the subject of chemistry. I got above a 95 in the class itself, and I ended up getting a 76, I believe, on my first try on the Regents exam. I retook it later on, and I raised that grade up a bit, but it was very frustrating at the time because I knew I was a lot smarter than getting a 76% on that Regents exam. So after that, I reached out to my friend Abigail Egger. She is a very close friend of mine, and I knew that she would have an opinion on the Regents exams. She is currently a graduate of Moyne College, graduating in 2024, and she is currently studying up for her dental exam to get into dental school. She is also one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and she is historically a very bad test taker. So this is what she had to say. I asked her 4 questions about Regents exams and asked her to respond to each one. I asked her, how did you do in your Regents exams overall? She replied, I got above 90s on all of my Regents except for math, where I usually got 80s, which was still pretty good, according to her. Number 2, I asked her, did you find Regents exams to help your education? She simply replied, no. I asked her to expound, she would not. For question 3, I asked, did you find the Regents exams to help in your test-taking future? She replied, no, but I always struggled with test-taking. Number 4, I asked, overall, do you think Regents exams are helpful in our education system? And she replied, I see their purpose, but wouldn't necessarily say that they are helpful. Why is this important? Well, Abby is a very intelligent woman. I would trust her being a dentist wholeheartedly. I would trust her doing surgery on me. She is an incredibly smart woman, and she will be very successful in her future endeavors. she struggled with test taking a lot. She struggled with the rigidity of it. She struggled with the idea of having to sit in a room for 3 hours and complete your exam. She didn't have an IEP, she didn't have a 504. She just struggled with test taking, and she did not feel as though they were a good representation of her knowledge, which is very similar to how I felt. Moving forward from that, I wanted to reach outside of the state. Me being in an interesting position where I did my undergraduate degree in Indiana, I thought it might be useful to talk to some people that I met in Indiana from either Indiana or another state, and see how they did it. So I reached out to a handful of people. The first one was Mitchell Allen Smith. He just graduated from Purdue University with a Bachelor's of Science in the School of Computer Science. And he went to Shelbyville High School, which is a medium to large size high school in a medium to large size city. And I asked him some very similar questions that I asked to Abby, but as it pertained to his schooling. I asked him to describe his testing experience, his final exams, and just give me a little bit of insight into how they do it and his thoughts on how we do it. So what he said was that the closest thing that they have to a Regents exam is what's called ISTEP. ISTEP is a general education examination delivered every year from 3rd grade to 8th grade. They take a break in 9th grade and then administer it again in 10th grade. It covers all main subjects, including language arts, social studies, science, and math, over the course of those years. Not every exam contains each subject. It just depends on what grade you are in at the time of that exam being delivered. He said that everyone in Indiana agrees that ISTEP is not a good program. They think that it is not beneficial to the students, not a good showcase of their knowledge, and just kind of a general marking to see where the intelligence levels of the students are overall. Then we discussed his final examinations when he was in high school, where he told me that all of them were local finals made by his teachers in high school. He also said that they do have a testing week like we do, but it is not even close to the same way that we do it. Because they're all local finals, they can be a lot shorter. So they have 50-minute periods. Each day, they have 2 testing days. They will expand that one period out into 2 periods. So period 1 will take up periods 1 and 2. Period 2 will take up periods 3 and 4. Period 3 will take up periods 5 and 6. And period 4 will take up 7 and 8, and then they go home early, right? The purpose of that is because each exam should be short enough for the students to complete it in that time period, while also allowing them to showcase their knowledge. Then the following day, their afternoon exams will be taken starting periods 1 in the same system that they did the previous day. Because they're local finals, it's a lot easier to control how much the teacher can put on that exam and shorten it up for the student's attention span and time constraints. The other interesting thing, he did perform well on all of his final exams, saying the only one he majorly struggled with was chemistry, which is a sentiment that I can really echo. And he did say that he does not believe that finals benefited him. He doesn't think that they are useless, but does not think exams are a good measure of one's knowledge in a particular subject in class. I asked him to expound on that a little bit more, and what he said was that if you are required to show up day after day after day, learning all of this material, doing all of this homework, he does not think that it is a proper showcase of your knowledge to sit down for an hour and a half and complete a paper that basically just says, this is what I know off of these questions. He said that he doesn't think that a final tally of someone's knowledge should come based on the terms of the person writing the exam. It should come based on the terms of the student. I thought that was a very interesting way to put it. The next person that I interviewed was someone from the same school district, same Shelbyville High School, but he is 3 years older, so he had experienced a little bit of a different thing. His name is Cameron McGugan. He works at Bastion Solutions Embedded Systems, and he is an engineer there. Also a graduate from Purdue University, graduating with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. I asked him the same questions I asked Bucket. I asked him the same questions that I asked Mitchell. And he said the same thing. It was made by teachers, and he did do well on the exams. He also spoke with very severe language when it came to the exams themselves, and he said, "I don't believe that they were beneficial at all. They were more of a checkpoint or requirement to do than to actually check and improve your knowledge on the subject. Often the teachers would give a study guide with most of the answers on it, so I never felt as though it expanded my knowledge on any topics or made me a more intelligent person." He makes an interesting argument for and against the idea of local finals, without particularly taking a stand on it. I do think it's quite interesting to think about the fact that, yes, if there are more local finals, then the teacher can meddle with that a bit more to artificially inflate their test scores. That's something I hadn't quite considered before reading his response back to me. And so I do think that when we move forward from Regents exams everywhere, that is going to be something interesting that we have to deal with. Now that we've heard a couple of different perspectives, I want to focus back in, for the sake of time, on my general thoughts on the policy's history of Regents exams. I think I toe the line somewhere between what Abigail said and what Cameron McGugan said, where I just don't particularly find Regents exams to be a great representation of knowledge, and I'm very happy that we're moving more towards a way in which we can showcase our students' knowledge in ways other than just a state-mandated examination. I don't think that that's the best way that everyone can show their knowledge. I think that there are plenty of extremely intelligent people who are floundering because of the amount of work they have to put in to study for each exam. They're just not ready for it. And I know one of the reasons I asked Abigail if it prepared her for examinations in the future is that I know that a lot of people argue that strict exams now help kids later in things like college and in their future. She doesn't feel that way, and I don't feel that way. When I went to college, a lot of my teachers gave us very creative assignments to help us understand the knowledge, understand the content more, and to test our knowledge on the content more. In fact, I found that I learned more in most of the classes where I didn't have a lot of exams, rather than the ones where I did. One of the great examples of that was when I was in college. I just took a random elective called the History of Wine, where we would go over the making of wine and the history around it. We wouldn't have exams. It was a lot of projects, a lot of recording videos of ourselves doing a tasting and explaining the history and the taste and the aromas and all of that. And I found myself learning a lot more about wine than I did in my class on counterterrorism, where I felt like I didn't really learn much about counterterrorism, and that class was mostly examinations. So in the end, I really feel as though New York State's doing the right thing by kind of getting rid of the overarching Regents requirement, but I think that in a perfect world, we should be moving more towards a more project, more creative, focused future in New York State education. Now, I know that one of the big criticisms of more of what I'm saying is along the lines of what Cameron McGugan said, which was, the teachers can just give out whatever, and then the students don't really have to try that hard because they'll already have the answers. And a lot of that is kind of talked about in Slaying Goliath when it comes to like school choice. One of the big criticisms of private schools and charter schools is that it's a lot harder to kind of regulate what they have to teach and what their students have to learn than it would be to maybe do that in a public school where everything we do has to be regulated. In a private school, it's a lot easier, and in a charter school, it's a lot easier to kind of curb that and just teach what you think is important to teach instead of what is actually important to teach. Slaying Goliath deals with a lot of that, and I think that is a very important criticism of what I'm offering. And I would like to say what I'm offering is not a fully thought out solution. It is not a perfect solution by any means. I'm just a 23-year-old dude with a camera talking about my experience with schools in general and my thoughts on the matter. I do find it to be quite interesting to have these discussions and to compare it to things like charter schools and private schools. for instance, both of my brothers went to a private school out in Syracuse. They both had to take Regents exams, but they didn't really get the knowledge as much as I did. They still were very state focused when it came to their testing, when it came to their finals. But because they had to fill most of their time with a religious education as well as a normal education, they did not learn the material as well as I did. And so I think that there is some kind of sweet spot where it's kind of going too far in the other direction, where they, with their freedom, they kind of filled their education with things that just wouldn't necessarily help them in the future because the state allowed them to. Now, looking forward, I think one of the things that will be kind of interesting with what I'm proposing here is how it deals with teachers' unions. Obviously, in the current administration, it is not exactly union-friendly, to say the least, and so I think that looking into the future, if we go a less state-mandated route and more of a looking into the future, I think that one of the interesting things that we can take a look at are unions and how that will impact kind of what I have already spoken of when it came to Regents exams. I think that teachers' unions are a great tool. I think that they're important, and obviously the current administration is not very union-friendly. So going forward, if we were to kind of get rid of Regents exams, or at least not make them a requirement, then what's left? Well, then the teachers have to themselves come up with their own solutions, like we were talking about with either different exams or kind of projects, that kind of thing. I do not know how that will go, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know if the current administration would give unions enough support to enact something like that, so it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If we do decide to go that way, then I'm not quite sure how much support the teachers are going to have to do what they need to do to benefit these kids. But if they don't go that way, then it's just going to lead to more and more students kind of falling apart with these exams when there could be something done about it. I don't necessarily think that what I propose is perfect. I don't think that it's bad necessarily. I do think it needs a lot of thought and consideration, though, considering how many students I have spoken to that really quite dislike the way that things are currently. And even if that brings up new problems, I think it's at least worth taking a try. So what are some of the big takeaways here? Well, just to kind of summarize all of the other bits that I've already discussed here, the autobiography part of it, I wanted to discuss my Regents exams and how I thought they either benefited me or did not benefit me. And for the most part, I don't think they benefited me or the other people that I spoke to at all. I think that they should be looked at as something that we can probably do away from. I think that overall testing has a kind of negative impact on our students' educations in general. Now, that doesn't mean that they are inherently bad. They can be done very well. I just don't think that they are the solution to a lot of our problems. And as for the future, I think the important thing to look at for ruminating on the future is to just kind of talk about how teachers' unions are impacted during all of this, and whether or not we can change too drastically while also not giving teachers' unions the support that they need to enact this kind of change on a teacher-to-teacher level.